Thank you, Mr Bryant. Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like all the speakers before me, I am delighted to serve under your chairmanship, and I'm also very grateful to the member for Renfrewshire North and all the others involved in bringing this debate forward today. Gender-based violence is a function of gender inequality and the abuse of male power and privilege, and it takes the form of actions that result in physical, sexual and psychological harm or suffering to women and children, an affront to their human dignity, including the threat of such acts. And it is men, not all men, a tiny minority of men who predominantly carry out such violence, and women who are predominantly victims of it. And by referring to violence as gender-based, we can highlight the need to understand violence within the context of females' insubordinate status in society. And as such, this violence cannot be understood in isolation from the norms and social structure and gender roles within the community, which greatly influence women's vulnerability to violence. For far too long, this issue has been confined to the shadows, where what goes on behind closed doors is private. Violence is never something that should be considered private. An attack on one woman by a male perpetrator in so many ways is an attack on all women, because it goes to the very heart of how the male perpetrator views women and what a woman's role should be in relation to a man's. How we as a society recognise and respond to this violence goes to the heart of the kind of society we seek to build, the kind of society we aspire to be. This should never be an issue consigned to the shadows, and it is shocking that it ever was. Thankfully, times have changed, and we as a society are beginning to shine a light, a very bright light, on this, so that no woman should feel trapped in a cycle of violence, and no man should ever feel that perpetrating violence against his partner is a private matter. In Scotland in 2013-14, shamefully, there was almost 60,000 incidents of domestic abuse recorded by police, and this figure increased by 2.5% in the year 2014-15. And the real figure, as we all know, is likely to be much higher, since this is a crime which is very much underreported for a whole variety of reasons. Latest figures continue to show that females make up the overwhelming majority of victims of domestic abuse at 80%. The overwhelming majority of serious sexual assaults have been carried out by men, 94%, and 83% of victims know the offender. 54% of victims identify the perpetrator as their partner. This is a matter of deep concern to us all, since violence against women, violence against anyone, is a fundamental violation of human rights. And any discussion of violence, particularly violence against women, perpetrated by men, must recognise the role that men can and must play in preventing and countering this violence. But it's also important, as others have pointed out before me, that the vast majority of men are not violent towards women. But all the evidence shows that when violence occurs, it is perpetrated overwhelmingly by men. Our efforts should be less about dealing with the aftermath of this violence, although clearly that's important, but we must confront the root causes of this violence, and that requires us to reflect upon how to address the role of men, specifically the attitudes, behaviours, identities and relations of men who exhibit violence. We should be clear that many men understand that it's important to engage them in this debate and underline that they have an extremely positive role to play in helping to stop violence against women. And it truly is heartening to see so many men supporting the White Ribbon campaign right across Scotland, right across the UK, and indeed in global terms, raising awareness amongst both men and boys, promoting discussion, providing information and resources to support personal and collective action among men. And I am delighted that my own local authority, North Ayrshire Council, participated in and supported the White Ribbon campaign's 16 Days of Action, joining millions globally in this international crusade. And indeed, North Ayrshire Council has its own violence against women strategy set out in a comprehensive way. I will indeed.
I'm extremely grateful to the Honourable Lady. Quite a few people today have made reference to teaching about relationships in schools and the value of PSHE. Does she agree that we need to give some serious thought to the whole process of socialisation of young men who grow up without a role model, with a violent father, the result of a serial father, young men who have no access to any kind of information or modelling other than violent relationships? Wouldn't that be a crucial area to concentrate on if we want to make a sea change in this area?
I think you make a very, very valid point. And one of the things I know that's taking place in Scotland, and I understand it's taking place right across the United Kingdom, is to try and recruit more male primary school teachers to give young boys that positive role model that they may be lacking at home or in their wider family circle. And I think that's to be encouraged and supported. And of course, other social outlets like getting children involved, particularly children who may be at risk of not having access to these role models if they're identified in the school setting, to be directed towards activities like football clubs, where again they can get that positive role model from men that they might not otherwise have. Our ultimate goal must be a society where women feel equal to men, safe and respected. And I'm proud that the Scottish Government's commitment to achieving that goal in Scotland has been so clear, with record levels of funding and legislation to ensure that Scotland works towards the prevention and eradication of all forms of violence against women. And I won't go over the ground that my colleague from Paisley and Renfrewshire North has gone over, but there has been various funding initiatives in Scotland to tackle this particular issue. And there's simply one I would mention, which is the Caledonian system, which works with men convicted of domestic abuse offences to address the underlying causes of their behaviour and further protect women. And indeed, only a few days ago, the Social Justice Secretary in the Scottish Government, Alec Neil MSP, announced more funding for women's support groups across Scotland. But clearly, there is much, much more to do. And of course, we need to remember that if a mother is not safe in her own home, it is extremely unlikely that her children will be. We know that children frequently come to the attention of other agencies when the severity and length of exposure to abuse has compromised the mother's ability to nurture and care for her children. So make no mistake, living with domestic abuse is a form of emotional abuse for children. And many children can vividly describe incidents of violence within the home and their feelings of terror, powerlessness and fear. In addition to witnessing violent behaviour, children may also witness coercive, intimidating and manipulative behaviour and or direct threats. And these types of behaviour are as frightening and harmful to children as physical violence, and who knows, who can measure the long-term effect on a child. And of course, we know that when a partner manages to escape from her violent partner, this also has a profoundly damaging effect on children, leaving them distressed, confused and with a deep sense of loss, which leaves the child with perhaps lifelong emotional scars. The violence that some men perpetrate on their partners does indeed do harm to more than the women against which the violence is directed. And in Scotland, the Scottish Government is committed to Clare's Law, and my honourable friend from Inverclyde has spoken about this at some length, and I won't go over that ground, but the point I would emphasise is that this is indeed a powerful example of the constructive role that men can take in preventing violence against women. In Ayrshire, interesting things are happening in my neck of the woods. Individuals who are known to the police in the context of committing domestic violence are monitored by the police, and over periods such as the festive period, in which cases of domestic violence, the incidence spikes, dedicated domestic abuse cars are deployed by police with officers solely dedicated to dealing with incidents of domestic abuse. Similar to intervention, visits are paid to those who the police know have a history of committing domestic abuse to proactively let them know that such behaviour will be pursued by the police and divert them from this behaviour. And I would urge the Minister today to reflect on the fact that any escape from domestic abuse requires women to be able to access some level of financial independence from their partners, and women experiencing domestic abuse face considerable barriers when trying to escape from this situation. But as universal credit will replace benefit payments paid separately to each member of a couple, with a single payment going to one claimant in the household, This can only increase women's financial dependency, prevent women from leaving their home, their abusive home, and place them and their children at increased risk. It is absolutely essential to engage positively with men. They are very important allies in any strategy in trying to tackle this problem of men who exhibit abusive behaviour. Rather than imposing a sense of guilt and shame on all men, we must make every effort to ensure that men understand that they have an opportunity to play a crucial part as positive role models in the prevention of violence against women. By challenging the attitudes of peers, by teaching their children about equality between the sexes from a young age, by refusing to condone the objectification of women and the commercial sexual exploitation of women at any level, prevention of violence against women can be achieved through positive engagement of non-perpetrating men, who are the vast majority of men out there. Thank you.
Naz Shah.